Our guest today is Rana Rahimpour, a journalist, broadcaster, co-founder of Obsidian and host of Obsidicast. So Rana is an Iranian British journalist and broadcaster who worked as a lead presenter and bilingual reporter for the BBC for 15 years. Since leaving the BBC in 2022, she's studied counselling as well as psychedelic therapy with the British Transpersonal Association, and she's been a dedicated student of shamanism under Manu Kamon Churria. In January 2025, Rana launched Obsidicast, a podcast exploring spirituality, psychedelics, and consciousness. She's also a regular guest of Ravanama, a Farsi psychedelic society, where she engages her Persian-speaking audience in discussions about psychedelics. In our conversation, we cover Rana's growing up in Iran, her move to Britain at 25 years old, working as a journalist and broadcaster for the BBC, her experience of persecution and burnout, and now being a transpersonal counsellor, psychedelic therapist, and spiritual explorer. Enjoy this episode of The Healing Mindset. Here we are. Rana, how are you doing today?
I'm extremely well. I'm always very well.
Oh, wow. What's your secret?
The secret is the work that I've done that has put me in a place of bliss. And I constantly feel that we're part of love. And
Wow.
once you are connected to that love and you see everything from that perspective, there's no place for sorrow, no place for rage or anger or anything like that.
Beautiful. Now, this work you speak of, I assume it's not work at the BBC. It sounds like this is happening inside of you somewhere, yeah?
Yes, I can assure you that work does not happen at the BBC.
Yeah. So this is, your new job. And you mentioned love there and how important that is, and bliss. Beautiful. Just let's start there. What does that feel like, or how do you nurture that feeling, being present and amplifying that in your life, in your body, in your kind of daily awareness?
I think it's somewhere or a dimension. Some people call it the fifth dimension that I only managed to access with the help of plant medicine. That once you open the gates, or in my case, there were shamans and medicine people who opened those gates for me. And then the perception of reality all crumbled and completely changed my relationship with this human reality and my perspective about what life is, what we're doing here, what we are meant to be doing here. And that really changed my relationship with everything and everyone. So it put me in a state of detachment, pure love and bliss together with detachment. And that was achieved through the medicine. I can't say that I don't feel human emotions anymore. I still feel that from time to time. But now that I know that destination and there's that knowledge that I have accessed through plant medicine, it's much more easy to access it with breath work and meditation and daily practices and prayer. That you learn how to keep yourself in that frequency and that vibration throughout your life. So
Wow.
when emotions come up, anger comes up, anxiety comes up, it comes up and I look at it and I smile and I let it go because I know that ultimately everything is good.
When did this first appear in your life or present itself? Is it something that was there forever, or was there a particular moment when this kind of appeared?
It took a while, definitely took a lot of suffering thanks to my previous job. And reporting a lot of suffering and tragedies that then put me in a position of being diagnosed with PTSD and not finding any meaning in that suffering. And then my personal struggle, my midlife crisis, depression, it all arrived all at the same time. And it all arrived after I achieved everything I wanted to achieve. I had the job I wanted, I had the husband I wanted, I had the house, the fame, the wealth, you name it, I had it, but I was so empty inside. And so puzzled with what this all means and why is it the way it is, that I started the search. And I was very lucky to find my spirituality through the help of the medicine, but I don't need the medicine anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think the medicine was just a gateway that opened the portal and allowed me to have access to that place of love and bliss. But it took a while. I'd say that from the beginning of the journey until my first breakthrough, it took about 3 years.
Yeah.
I can't say I'm done. I feel every time that you go into a plant medicine ceremony with the right intention, in the right setting, with the right people, then you access a different level of consciousness and bliss. So the work is always there. Just being a human is work.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we're still here in human form, in my opinion, is still work to do. Primarily on ourselves, because I feel that we are all part of the big consciousness, and we are together, we create the collective consciousness. And the more work you do on yourself, the more you're helping the collective consciousness. So the work starts within, and then while you're there within yourself, then you can lift up others as well.
This has been a really nice way to get the ball rolling, and it's awesome to be talking about spiritual aspects of life, or what in life is not spiritual. I know we spoke before about transpersonal piece as well, so we're going to dip into that. I think it's really important. These are not scary words, folks. The spiritual and transpersonal. I want to start off by asking around another journey you've taken in life, and that was from Iran after 25 years to England.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, what was that journey about for you? What do you think changed as you kind of moved realms, moved worlds, and you stepped into a new life?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of what, looking back, really happened when you made that journey to England?
I think that all these stages were stages of growth for all of us, each individual in their life story. Each stage is a stage of growth. So growing up in Iran, I was born in a very spiritual / religious society. I'd say less religious these days because of all the political situation. People have become less and less religious. But I think there is in our history, the spirituality and our poetry and our mysticism is so rich in that region. And I was very privileged to be born in a country where I was introduced to all this. So I was introduced to Rumi and his worldview and his philosophy about life, which is ultimately love, and his constant vision is love and how you have to practice it or in your life. But like most Iranians living under a religious theocracy, I reached a point that I rejected everything. So age 20, I stopped everything, even though I was still scared of rejecting every god, because I was living in a country where saying that you don't believe in God can be received with capital punishment. And also, I didn't even allow that possibility in my psyche, even though I stopped praying and all that. And I stopped believing. Then I was lucky enough to be offered the job to work for the BBC. I was working as a journalist in Iran, age 23, 24. And then I was recruited by the BBC to move to London to work as a journalist covering Iran in Persian for the people in Iran, as well as English for non-Persians about what was going on in Iran. But then it put me in exile. It meant that I couldn't go back to Iran. My family were being persecuted inside the country. So it came with a lot of pressure. But for me, that was the stage of life that I became independent. An independent thinker, so there's no pressure from the society or the establishment. There's no pressure from family and relatives. And I had financial independence as well. As a woman, Middle Eastern woman, it's unusual to be so lucky to get a job in London. So you have your own income, and then it's a very prestigious job. That decade of my life was a decade about me and building my ego, and wanting to be seen, and wanting to leave an impact, and wanting to do, and then wanting to go up the success ladder of being famous, being a journalist that people listen to. Then I wanted to get married. I had children. So it became about my ego. It became about Rana and what Rana meant. So I built that. And I became an atheist. I just said there's nothing beyond this life and this is just random. It's pure luck we're here and there's nothing after death. But to be honest, I didn't even engage much with that conversation. I was mostly about my career, my family, building it, and that's all I cared about. Until all of that was achieved and it was settled, that I started having this crisis. I would call it a crisis of meaning. Mm-hmm. So the universe gave me everything I asked for, anything material that I asked for, and I include my family, my children into that. And then I felt empty and very depressed. And also that many of the stories that I covered were tragedies that was happening to people, children being killed, protesters being imprisoned. It was horrible. And I couldn't find any meaning beyond that. And that put me in a position of searching and looking. And throughout that process, I had the experience of ego death. And then slowly, I had to shed the layers and remove everything to reaching a point that it's no longer about me. It's about the collective and the work that I feel I'm here. I finally have clarity, age 42 now. I finally had clarity. I knew and I found out why I'm here and what the work is for me to do. And I have to say that it's much more pleasurable than the first half of my life. Very humbling.
Thank you for sharing around ego. And, you jumped into a new life and, wow, you did amazing things. You've really achieved so much. And I love that you were saying the universe gave you everything you asked for. So in a sense, I'm feeling like you didn't ask it for everything that you really deserved, or you only asked it for things that probably rationally made sense, job and, safety and kids, amazing things nevertheless. Whereas if you ask the universe for something else that's tuned in more deeply within who you actually could become conceptually outside of a limiting ego definition, wow, then actually there's more that's available. But it's a bit of a leap of faith into that. And that's, I guess, why psychedelics can be so helpful, just to bring it onto the radar, to find, the ability to tune into it in the radar, to find it, and then, to persevere. And you said it took 3 years. Like, that's a pretty serious integration practice from the moment of like the switch being turned on to, feeling like, it's now kind of resonating deep within.
So the ego pull is very strong. So even though you have an opening, you still can't let go of what the society has told you is important. That was one of my biggest problems when I had my midlife crisis. Was okay. At some point I looked at my life and said, okay, I achieved everything, but was any of this ever my decision, or was the society and my parents and my friends told me that this is what success looks like? And now I don't even use the word success. What is success? Becoming famous is success, being rich is success, because I think the society is so confused about what they see as happiness. And that's where the moment that I felt empty inside. So, okay, my mom and dad wanted me to do this. My mom and dad wanted to have grandchildren. My mom and dad thought this is a prestigious thing to do, and it all comes from a good place. So I have a lot of appreciation for my parents, but it's the society's values that is somehow ingrained in you. I wouldn't even say imposed, because at the same time I had very liberal parents, so I didn't want to become an engineer, and they were okay with it, even though I was very good at maths. They didn't force me to they didn't force me to do anything, but then at the same time they had transferred their values to me. But those values, then later on I realized, are very misaligned with the purpose of me being here.
I'm feeling that when you were a journalist and covering so many stories, you were trying to be objective and impartial, and you're telling really other people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's this liberation I'm feeling around telling your story. And it's important to you as part of your healing, maybe post-traumatic growth as well, to tell your story, but also to still be creating that story from a place of like meaning and what values, in a sense, are part of your story now. So you're the narrator of this new story. What kind of values are in this plot each day as they unfold? And you mentioned bliss and love. What are some of those kind of things in your story that's really popping out the page?
The new storylines is love. The constant is love and relationships and alignment. And yes, you're absolutely right. So it's part of the BBC's guideline that you have to be impartial, which was easy when I joined the BBC when I was 25, but it became less easy when I grew up and I formed my own opinion and I realized that, no, okay, I'm not impartial about this atrocity that is happening in this part of the world. I can't say that they're equal in my view. If the Iranian regime is killing its youth, I'm not impartial. I am on the side of that young person who's fighting for freedom. And that became more and more suffocating. So as a journalist working for the BBC, you're not allowed to express your personal opinion on any matter in public. And that became very difficult, David. You have no idea how frustrating it was. There were times that I was screaming inside, but I had to a poker face and stare at the camera and pretend that I'm not crying inside with the tears of this mother that I'm interviewing, whose child has been assassinated by the regime. And it's interesting. So one of my goals when I decided to finally leave the BBC after 15 years was to broadcast my opinion about everything. But then that happened parallel to the work that I was doing with psychedelics and on myself. And then now I have all that freedom, but I don't have any opinion.
Why no opinion?
Because somehow I have managed to move beyond all of that. Somehow I have become truly impartial within me, that I feel that there's no reason for me to express my opinion about anything in the world. So that bit disappeared, and it surprised a lot of people, but people who knew me and former colleagues and friends who knew how opinionated I used to be, and I wanted to be able to express that. They can't believe that when they talk about current affairs, I just listen and I don't say anything. Because I now, with my spirituality, I have a different understanding of everything that's happening. So I don't get entangled in the perception of what's happening anymore.
You mean by not getting entangled, you're not identifying your sense of self or meaning in the words and convincing somebody about what is true?
Exactly.
In that way. Right.
Exactly. Because I believe there's only one truth, and that truth is love. And anything below that is a way for us to grow and evolve and maybe reincarnate in a different life with more wisdom. But I don't engage with the physical perception of what we call reality anymore. Some people might say that I have become I'm too passive now, but my interest is not there anymore. My interest is on healing and helping others come into the consciousness.
Yeah. Well, something very physical and healing is the body. And I wanted to ask about your experience going through your kind of crisis and breakdown and then subsequent kind of spiritual growth. All of that news coverage, the stories that you had with, the mother whose daughter was assassinated, for example, like you must have absorbed a lot physically, like into your body in order to seem on the camera like you are impartial. And you just got to ask the questions and keep the interview going. So I'm curious from a somatic perspective, and as a healer and a counselor, as you now are, Rana, what has your body kind of taught you around what it had held in and what it had done to hold that in, and how to kind of let that out on a more kind of somatic and energetic level?
So one of the problems with journalism is that they don't teach you how to cleanse yourself,
right,
and how to protect yourself. So in counseling, one of the first things is for you how to have to set those boundaries, and how to you make sure that you have time to get everything out, and how you see it's put a space between your client and yourself, so their problem is not your problem. You learn that because you're taught that. In journalism, they don't teach you that. And a lot of people who become journalists at the beginning because they have a lot of empathy, and they want to help, and they want to be the voice of those who don't have a voice. So it comes from a very good place, but you go in with an open heart. And that caused a lot of ailment, physical ailment, David. There were bouts that I was depressed, I couldn't get out of bed, but then there were bouts that I had various joint pains, and I had problems with my digestion, and I did all sorts of tests. And originally they thought that I had rheumatoid arthritis because I couldn't even move my fingers because of all the tension that I felt. I couldn't sleep properly. I was absent. Even the first couple of years of my children's lives, I was physically there but mentally absent.
Yeah.
And all of that disappeared when I left my job and I started doing the work. All the ailments are gone.
Wow. So that was a really powerful sign. Your body just needed to be out of that environment.
And because it also, there's this constant state of fight or flight that is just pumping cortisol in your system all the time. And you get addicted to it. So at the time I thought, oh, other people's lives are so boring because they don't have all this excitement and adrenaline pumping through their bodies. And it takes a lot of strength to pull away. And the stress came from so many aspects. So on one level, it was the nature of the stories that I covered. On the other level, there were the threats on my life on behalf of the Iranian regime. So I was receiving death threats. I was under surveillance. Counter-terrorism police had to look after me. So it was on a physical level. And my car was broken into. So there was this very serious possibility of me being killed at some stage. That was the height of it. And that was the moment that I decided it's enough. 15 years is enough.
Wow. And moving into the counseling world. So, you were doing a couple of courses, counseling and the transpersonal one. How did that kind of evolve as the next step for you? How clear was that? Or at what stage did that kind of appear as the next step? It
took a while. My first mushroom experience was in 2020 after my own PTSD episode. And in that ceremony, which I was completely on my own, but I had educated myself a lot. So I had read so much by that stage that I knew what was going to happen. So I guided myself through that journey. It was in that journey that the medicine told me that I had to give some mushrooms to my parents and a couple of close friends. And I was very confident doing that, but I was still a journalist and a very prestigious, very well paid, much better paid than I'm earning now, job, that it wasn't obvious for me to give up that job, even though I was unhappy and even though I felt unsatisfied and unfulfilled. But it was very convenient. I had done it for so many years. I was a senior member of the team. I was getting paid well. I was being respected, all that. So it wasn't an obvious transition for me. But in 2023, starting from November 22, then April 2023, a series of things happened that made me decide to leave the BBC. Not journalism. So it was just, I'm done with covering Iran in Persian because of the pressure and a lot that happened around it. And I was very angry with the BBC. So I left it. And my immediate step after that was to look for jobs in the same industry. So I had lined up meetings with editors at CNN and Sky News and a couple of think tanks. That would have been my obvious route, the next step for someone who has worked at the BBC. You end up going to another news channel or a think tank. And I had booked that. And I was meeting several people for brainstorming sessions. And I was introduced to this lovely professor at LSE University. He was in his 70s and who's very well connected, and he could help me a lot in finding the right contacts in that world. But he gave me the best advice someone could have given me at the time, and that was not to do anything for 6 months and not say yes, not say no, just do nothing. And he said, this is the first time in your life that you have a chance just to sit down and find out and go deep within to decide what it is that you really want to do. So I had been playing around with psychedelics a bit, unofficially guiding family members and friends, but this was just an interest, a passion. It wasn't a job. So I took some time off, and a friend who's very experienced with psychedelics, but for some reason he was scared of mushrooms. He messaged me and he said, I would like to have a mushroom ceremony and I would like you to guide me. And I very frivolously said, oh, maybe that's what I should do. Maybe I should just go and study and become a psychedelic therapist. And that was the moment that there was this realization that, of course, that's what I have to do. So I never went back to any of those meetings. I then signed up to do a psychedelic facilitation course with British Transpersonal Association. And then at the same time, I signed up to do counseling courses. And I've never looked back. It's much more fulfilling than anything I've ever done in my life.
I love that. I'm going to take what you just said and just riff a little bit around, the default mode network that's spoken a lot in psychedelic research, and our mind gets stuck in these kind of grooves, and then it's almost like an analogy is of being like a snow globe, and you just shake it and it kind of creates new pathways of snow. You can go in different directions, and it's like our brain can think in new ways and develop, in a sense, new narratives. So part of what you're saying there is kind of shaking that snow globe about what's important in life, but also who am I? Like the ego piece, like who do I identify as? And it's like I've applied for jobs, yes, and typically I will just look for the same job title as the one I've just left, because it's just so easy to think that's who I am. I'm the director of this, I'm the manager of that, and and that's who I am. And it's almost like I think I've said to my wife as well that until I met her, I'd always been looking for someone that was similar to my ex-girlfriends. But then when I met her, I realized, oh no, it was completely different. And similarly with the kids, when we're talking about trying new foods, don't just stick to the foods that you're comfortable with, because there's so many other foods out there. And my point here is that we tend to get so stuck in just living in assumptions and living in this default mode network of what's good enough or what I'm capable of or who I actually am, that's really limiting. But we might not know that. It can be reassuring to keep that certainty there and to have that sense of grounded expectancy of, oh, this is who I am, this is what I'm here for. But it might not be true. And yeah, just stepping back into that place of transpersonal truth, anything is possible, everything is possible, and that's overwhelming. But yeah, from that comes a bit more liberation and authenticity. And so that's just hearing you speaking, that's kind of part of your process, really stepping into that, just doing things new. And it's scary, and you're stepping out of that. But God, you had that 6-month period. Beautiful, like this liminal space of just feeling and tuning in. So kind of beautiful. You gave yourself permission to do that.
Yes. But it was difficult. And you're absolutely right, because the default can be very convenient. It's something you've done before, and you know that that's what that a wise old man told me. He said, of course you'll get paid more if you go to CNN because they pay better than the BBC, but you will get used to the amount that you earn within a couple of months. But the job is the same, and all the frustration and the fatigue and the boredom that you felt, that's going to come back because you get used to the new salary, and you will spend it all. It's not going to change anything within you. But then also, I feel that it's a privilege. Not everyone has that privilege. I was lucky enough to be able to afford taking 6 months off to find out what it is that I really want to do. And also, it's a process. I think we're constantly evolving. If you asked me when I was 25 whether I wanted to be a psychedelic therapist, I probably would have said no. I would have said I want to be a journalist.
Yeah, me too. I wasn't expecting to be doing this line of work.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to have followed that. And again, framing part of this new narrative as post-traumatic growth as well. So being a psychedelic therapist, what do you want to do with that? Like, what can you do with that in England or in Europe or around the world? Like, what right now and is possible? And hopefully what in the future do you hope you might be able to do even more?
So unfortunately, psychedelics are still illegal in the UK, even though there's a lot of campaigning and lobbying going on. I collaborate with a campaign group called PAR, Psilocybin Access Rights. And they're doing a lot of work with various MPs. They're hoping to push for change. Obviously, Britain is rather conservative. So everything needs a lot of more force to change. It's a country that likes to stick to the old. So that's happening, and it means that I can't practice as a psychedelic therapist in the UK. But I have a teacher who lives in Mexico, and he's a shaman. And so we run ceremonies in Mexico, we run ceremonies in Jamaica, ceremonies in the Netherlands. But what I do in the UK is normal counseling. Interestingly, something new that I have started is I now have clients who have had psychedelic experiences, who are looking for counselors who understand those experiences. And so I'm doing counseling with them, and we try to decipher their journeys and bring out what they have learned and then apply it into their daily lives. And so that's perhaps so we are setting up an organization called Mind and Soul Space, and the work we will be doing integration counseling, which is exactly that. People who are having psychedelic experiences, and there are many of them, and have difficult experiences, they can't really go to a normal therapist to do talk therapy. The therapist who doesn't really understand psychedelics, have never worked with the other realm, are not necessarily spiritual. Whereas a lot of the work, when you work with psychedelics, you have to work with the spirit, and you have to work on that level, and you have to meet the client in that level in order to help them on the path. So that's what I'm doing. I'm also, so I'm setting up an organization with my teacher called Obsidian. And the aim is to build a bridge between Indigenous wisdom and Western knowledge. Because one thing that I sensed was the lack of relationship between all the modules and all these courses that are created in the West, and we were not really learning and receiving enough from Indigenous shamans and teachers who have been working with these medicines for thousands of years and have such depth of wisdom that I noticed when I went to Ecuador, and I sat on a teaching retreat for 3 weeks, and I worked with Shuar, a Shuar shaman called Hilario. And it was then that I realized that, okay, what I have learned in the Western modalities is so little, and it needs a lot more to be added to it. Hence, creating Obsidiana, so we can educate people like myself who are interested in psychedelics, who can go and find the authentic sources of wisdom, and they can learn from them. Yeah. Busy times.
Sounds great. That's going to keep you busy, for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
We mentioned before Obsidian, and that's something that a stone that I've loved. I used to work in an antique jewelers when I was a kid, actually, and I remember just like looking into Obsidian. It's like a meditation, and there's also like things like cat's eye as well, which is a little bit different. But there's Obsidian. It's like a mirror, and it's deep. There's the depth inside. This kind of really jet black, somewhat shiny, but very deep and mysterious. So I remember that, and it's a beautiful stone. What does that mean to you, or what kind of relevance does it have in your life?
It's interesting you mentioned that. So obsidian is a volcanic stone, indigenous from Mexico, and it's actually called a black mirror. When you meditate with your obsidian and look into it, this allows you to see your dark side as well. It also energetically it gives you protection. So when we go in ceremony, we have to bless it with burning sage and Palo Santo, and that, so we bless it. Once you bless it, you don't touch it, and you definitely wear it, and it gives you a certain degree of protection against everything that's going on energetically in a ceremony, and it just, you make sure that it doesn't enter you. So that's where the name Obsidiana comes from, because one of the first presents that I received from my teacher was an obsidian necklace. Yeah.
That's great. So it really is a mirror. It gives that a potential.
It's a mirror, and I really recommend meditating with it.
And I've listened to a few of the episodes of your podcast, Obsidicast. What is the message there that you want to send out to people? What kind of guests are you going to be having on there?
So Obsidicast, when I left journalism, a lot of people said, oh, you have to do something, but I didn't want to do current affairs. I didn't want to do politics. I'm not interested. It's on repeat. Politics is on repeat, and things never move forward. Yeah. And I kept telling people that I'm not interested in that anymore. And then a couple of months ago, I lost my nephew, who was 14, and it was a very, very difficult moment for me. And one of the evenings that I was going to bed, I started receiving this message that you need to go back, and this is what you need to talk about. How that suffering and that loss helped my consciousness elevate, and how spirituality can help you deal with grief. But then that opens so many other doors. So Obsidicast is a series of conversations about spirituality, plant medicine, naturopath. So a friend of mine, Camilla, she's going to be a regular, where we talk about natural remedies for many of our current conditions, mental health or physical health conditions, because I believe that we're part of nature, and whatever that we need and whatever medicine that we need is in nature. If we haven't lost the wisdom and the knowledge, we can find the medicine in nature. So there are conversations about life, death, dreams, telepathy, lucid dreaming, using psychedelics for conflict resolution, AI and psychedelics, you name it. So anything in that realm is going to be on Obsidicast. Obsidicast is a platform. I see Obsidicast as a platform for all of these fascinating people and wisdom keepers to just come and share their knowledge, and we'll just put it out there for anybody who's looking.
Beautiful. Wow, it sounds really amazing, the depth you're going to go with that. Very different to just covering the news. And I like how you said it's kind of, news is like on auto repeat, like it's always going to be there, round and round, and we can get stuck in that loop. But outside of that loop, wow, then it's kind of infinitely open.
And also, I think the people who are stuck in those circumstances, and let's face it, there are many of them, plant medicine and spirituality can help them specifically. In fact, they much more them than those who are living a normal life in North London, like many of my neighbors. I think a lot of suffering happens for us to wake up. And so I'm doing Obsidicast with the aim of opening that window for those who are in suffering to be able to see their suffering from a different perspective. And this is what I sometimes tell my clients, that you will reach a point in the work that you do on yourself that you realize that suffering is a blessing, and suffering can lead to awakening. So I'm still serving the same people, but from a different angle. And my hope is that some people can find help in that conversation.
There's something beautiful around the realization of our suffering being treasure, and our trauma, having this potential to open up love, forgiveness, compassion, belief, hope. Whereas if we kind of just keep it hidden and stuck in layers and layers of life over it, then we get sick. And psychedelics are great at kind of tapping us on our ego and our shoulder and our soul to say, hey, there's a lot more inside if you're willing to go there. Sometimes we don't even get a choice. It just bursts out of us. I wanted to ask one final question, Rana, about, I don't know if it's of interest to you, but the kind of history in Persia of using plant medicines. I've met a couple of people along the way who kind of specialize in kind of ancient Persian, Middle Eastern psychedelic plants and incense. And there was one in particular from Iran called Haoma, I think it's pronounced. So I don't know, did you grow up with any sense of like the heritage in Persia of plants and incense? Or have you looked into that at all? Because it seems like it's pretty extensive.
It is extensive. I didn't necessarily grow up with it, but it's something that I'm now going back to, and it's become very, very interesting for me. So the seeds that are famously known as Syrian rue, they are indigenous of the Middle Eastern countries. And growing up, that was something that we burnt, like an incense. It's got a very distinctive smell. And that was traditionally used and still being used as something that removes evil eye and bad energies. And for us, it was just part of what we did. I didn't really read too much into it until I met my Mexican teacher, and he mentioned Syrian rue, and he said, I think a lot of your prophets from that region took Syrian rue in order to have their visions. And he mentioned Syrian rue, and I didn't have any idea what it meant until one day I looked it up and I realized that it's espand. It's the same thing that we have been burning in all our weddings, and when you buy a house, and whenever you get sick, your mom would say, go and burn some espand. It means it's because there's evil eye and someone has sent you some negative energy, and apparently that removes it. And that was a moment that my jaw dropped. I immediately phoned my friends and said, do you realize that Syrian rue is espand and we all have some in our kitchen cupboard? It was a very exciting moment. Obviously, in order to have visions, you need to turn it into a tea, and it has a ceremony. That is completely gone. So that none of that exists anymore. And I think a lot of it was very prominent during the Zoroastrian time, and with the invasion of Muslims, a lot of Zoroastrian traditions disappeared. But what's fascinating is that I find many similarities between Zoroastrian belief system and Latin American and South American traditions. For example, fire is very instrumental. In fact, Muslims accused Zoroastrians of worshipping fire. There was a firehouse. There's always fire present in their ceremonial spaces. And then I learned that Zoroaster used to burn an incense, which I think is Homa, but no one is sure because a lot of the script and knowledge has disappeared. But as you know, there are plants with psychoactive components all over the world for a reason. But with my new interest in Syrian rue, I'm planning to try it at some point, because I feel that given that I come from that part of the world, my indigenous plant is probably the right plant for me more than other plants. So that's as far as we know about psychedelics in Iran. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a big scene. There's a big underground scene of mushrooms and ayahuasca, and a lot is going on in Iran.
In Iran? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that your family have been using psychedelics for a long time. Even just burning incense in the kitchen. But it's beautiful that our relationship with nature, part of our healing individually, but collectively, I feel like nature needs to be a part of that. And the way earlier you were talking, Rana, about going on retreat, being in sacred space in a ceremony, with a group, and just connecting with nature. And you were just in Jamaica as well. It feels like just having more living things in our life, even literally if it's burning a piece of wood or bark or seeds, taking a walk in the park, or just being on retreat, or just simply for me lately, I've just been obsessed by looking up at the stars. I've always been like that, but the last year I just literally just have to go outside my house and just look up at the stars, just to remember that they're there, to give me this sense of perspective and awe. And in a sense, like what you were saying before, like not needing to have answers, not needing to be, sure about things or be part of this, cultural dialogue that just is a loop. So when I look at the stars, I'm transported outside. It's transpersonal for me, and it helps me get out of the stuckness of my mind sometimes. I'm meant to have more wonderment and gratitude and just resilience for life being this mystery. So for me, that's like literally my therapy at the moment, star therapy. What about you? What are some things that you're noticing you're doing lately to help you really connect?
I'm a lot like you, so I've always been fascinated by the stars, and I've also been very interested in astrology, Indian astrology, Vedic astrology, which is very close to Ayurvedic system, and to a degree that my friends make fun of me. So that's been an interest for 25 years. I constantly look at what's moving and what's going there and how it impacts our mood and other people around me. I just watch how they react when different planets are moving around. So skies have always been interesting. For me now, I'm fascinated by dreams and telepathy. I don't know whether you've listened to telepathy tapes.
No, everyone tells me to do that. Yeah.
Telepathy tapes have opened my eyes to things that I used to brush off about consciousness and our ability to plug in to the source and different layers of realms, and it's fascinating. It's mind-blowing. It's literally, I think, the most important podcast that I've ever listened to is Telepathy Tapes. But that has now made me very interested in our telepathic abilities and how we are able to access other realms and other beings and communicate with each other through things other than words. Especially because I had a client who has a 12-year-old nonverbal autistic child, and she came for a ceremony, and in the ceremony she was able to communicate with her child. And then she received a phone call from the school later after our session to say that nothing to worry about. We just phoned to say that your daughter was unusually happy today, and we don't know why. And we knew why. And when you listen to telepathy tapes, you realize. So for me, I found out about telepathy tape on the same evening after that session.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh wow. So what happened in the session was real. So there was communication on a different realm between this mother and daughter who's nonverbal.
And just the fact that you heard about the telepathy tapes podcast on that day, like literally, that also represents some kind of meaning and something at hand. Beautiful.
Yeah. Telepathy tapes makes you realize that everything is interconnected. And a lot of the things that I wasn't sure about, like various stones and crystals, all of that, it just makes everything understandable.
Okay, so it reinforces Obsidian as having this deeper meaning and others.
100%. And it changes. It's interesting. My husband wouldn't categorize himself as spiritual, and he's British, so he hasn't grown up with that degree of spirituality that I have grown up with. He listened to, and being British and science, everything's about science, and if you can't measure it, you dismiss it. He listened to telepathy tapes, and he said, even if I don't understand it, I believe it now. And for me, that's a major leap forward for the European way of thinking. That just, it opens up your mind to other realities, which is beautiful.
Yeah, British people, they are a very funny breed, aren't they? I am one of them. But similar to what you're saying, there's a teaching that I got from one of my rabbis in somewhere, that we often think that seeing is believing. You know, we have to see the proof. And then once I see the proof, then I'll adjust my beliefs accordingly. But what that literally means is we very rarely change our beliefs because, you know, life is how we expect it to be. It's kind of self-reinforcing. But if we actually connect with this believing is seeing, flipping it around, that our beliefs create what we see. They influence how open we are to seeing new things in new ways, or to receiving messages from unexpected places, or for conceptualizing life as a more mysterious place. Then we can really be open to seeing things in new ways. And that could be a very spiritual interoception of connecting with entities or lost loved ones, connecting with nature as well in new ways, or finding new parts within ourselves. It's just, I do jokingly agree with the British thing. Like, we just don't expect to change or grow much or evolve. Like, things are kind of predictable, like the weather, like it's always going to be kind of grey and rainy. But yeah, gosh, there's such a mystery about life. There's such variability and such liberation. If we can somehow kind of break through our own self-limiting, expectations and beliefs and narratives.
And that's why I think a single experience with psychedelics can open you up so much, because it makes you realize that seeing is so incomplete. So a very basic example is colors. So you take mushrooms or LSD or whatever, and then you start seeing colors in a different way. Then that immediately gives you more flexibility, mental flexibility, because you realize that, okay, the color that I see as navy or as yellow is only yellow and navy because of the construct of my brain and the nerves and my eyes. And then it makes you realize that nothing is solid, nothing is certain, and it just opens up to infinite possibilities. And that alone is so humbling, that you realize that, okay, there's nothing I know.
Yeah.
And that is a beautiful moment, that you realize that, okay, I'm living in this mystery that I know nothing of, and I'm just going to feel the love, spread the love, and allow the love to heal and make this human experience bearable for all of us.
Beautiful. That's an amazing way to end the conversation, Rana. I adore that. Thank you. And tell folks, if they want to find out more about you, where should they go?
I'm very active on social media, so I'm on Instagram. They can follow me, Rana Rahimpour on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. Even though I don't use it very, very much anymore for obvious reasons. Yes, so I'm out there, and they can listen to Obsidicast on all podcast platforms that they listen to their podcasts. It's also on YouTube. I often make sure I respond to all messages if I find the time.
Thank you, Rana. This has been great. We totally riffed together. Thanks for what you're doing and for being just really public, including with this podcast and with Obsidicast, just telling people who you are and helping to hold space for healing and the mystery of life and love. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It was a lovely conversation.
Yeah. All right. Until the next time, Rana. God bless. Thanks.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks again for watching, and thanks to our sponsor, Marpa Minds, a network of next-generation mental health clinics offering Spravato and ketamine treatment for depression. Go to marpaminds.com for more information.